President Trump having bombed Syria and ISIS in Afghanistan and talking tough against North Korea. A New York Times news story posed this question: will he talk himself into a war? Jillian Turner, when the Times says critics say the biggest risk for Trump is ending up in a war, is the underlying message this is potentially a dangerous commander-in-chief?
Yes, and I think the underlying message is also that this is a president who will sacrifice U.S. national security interests for politics. That's the message of the critics. Right, that's not my message. Right. That's the message of the critics.
Which leads me to, is that fair, given what he has done on the foreign policy and military front so far?
I don't think that based on his record during the first 100 days, that is a fair assessment to make. He has not done these sort of reckless military operations that we thought we were going to see, or that some in the media feared we would see. That has not come to be yet. But what I will say is that you also have to look at the coverage of the media. It's a little bit hypocritical because all the coverage about having him be this president who wants to take the counsel of the military, listens to his generals, he's stocked his cabinet with generals. These are all people who are going to serve as a moderating voice and actually dissuade him from preemptive military.
Now, it's fair, Katie published a report on mixed messages from the administration. You have Nikki Haley and Rex Tillerson, take two examples, talking tougher on Russia than President Trump does. But when the press says risk of war, isn't there also a risk of inaction?
Well, they act like we're not at war already. They act like we're not under daily terrorist threat. They act like the Iranians haven't been overly aggressive for the past 8 years, really, especially in the last 2 years of the Obama administration. I find it interesting that President Trump is the one who appears unhinged, according to the media, when it's North Korea who's saying they're going to shoot off a missile every week at this point just to be provocative, threatening the very existence of South Korea and the United States. And so it's very unfair, and it's also inaccurate when it comes to the status of the world today. We are at war in a lot of these places. It might not be a traditional sense, but we are at war in many parts of the world, and we certainly have a daily threat of terrorism here at home.
Ironically, Mo Alifi, the press portrayed candidate Trump, and properly so, as the America First candidate who is not as hawkish as Hillary Clinton, who is not going to be drawn or have the U.S. be drawn into foreign interventions, especially in the Middle East. But the jury is still out as to what his larger policy is after these less than first 100 days.
Yeah, and I think that is probably one of the things that gives a lot of people some unease, is we actually just don't know what is guiding him when it comes to national security and foreign policy. The military strikes in Syria, a lot of people felt like that was something that needed to happen.
That was praised throughout
by both parties, but a lot of people wondering, but what's next? Syria was launching military strikes from the same airfield the next day. What's next? We don't know what guides him in a lot of this stuff. When you look at how he's been talking about China, attacking it for wanting to call it a currency manipulator throughout the entire campaign, and then literally he says, well, after talking with the president for 10 minutes, I've changed my mind on this.
Well, also saying that he needs China's help on North Korea, so this is called diplomacy, and, you know, this is a president, as every president to some extent learns on the job, because no one's ever, you know, been beforehand been the commander-in-chief with impact on the whole world. But North Korea came up, and let's talk about that, Jillian. President's tough talk. You have North Korea making nuclear threats. Could be portrayed as risky. I get that. But I wonder whether the media playing it up, especially as a stretch of a few days there where it was just constant drumroll, whether that escalates tensions or gives Kim Jong-un a platform to make his threats against the U.S.
Well, certainly to turn on the television during those 24, 48, 72 hours, you would think that we were literally on the brink of a nuclear holocaust. So there was this element of media, and I hate the word fear-mongering, but fear-mongering, because people completely lose perspective and forget that this is not something new. U.S.-North Korea disputes over their handling of their missile program. This is something that's been simmering and boiling for the last 3 years, and the media just has not really been there on a daily basis covering this, I think, the way that they should have. So this comes as a surprise to people who aren't paying attention.
Media fear-mongering?
Absolutely. I mean, you look at the way that they portray the North Korean regime as if they can hit the United States tomorrow, and really that isn't the case. And so I do think that they're playing this up in an effort to make the president look like he is unhinged and incapable of handling the situation, even though he has had this negotiation with China in taking care of the problem, or at least addressing it anyway.
Right. And every president has had difficulties with North Korea, and have tried diplomacy, have tried threats. It's a very, very tough to deal with this regime. But media fear-mongering is an interesting analysis. And on that note, Mo Elleithee, Katie Pavlich, Jillian Turner, thanks very much for stopping by this Sunday.